Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on AI-driven accessibility, rethinking IEPs and special education, parentheses, in the age of AI and in the modern age of EdTech. We're so happy to see all of you here. This is an amazing community. Our panelists are fantastic and really have so many big ideas we want to share. We're going to get started very soon. But as everybody comes in, what I really want to encourage, we've seen the registrations for this webinar just pop up a lot over the last couple of weeks. So many amazing people here, and I really want to encourage everybody to look around at the other attendees in this room as you go into this. We have incredible panelists, but everybody here is doing really interesting work and thinking really hard about a very complex topic. Walker, do you want to kick us off and just welcome everybody too?
Yeah, so glad to have everybody. I'm Walker McKenzie, helped organize things. And I want to shout out, I don't think she's going to be here today, but Jen La Paz has helped so much get this all set up and make it possible. So yeah, I think we have a lot of speakers and a lot of things we want to get to. So I think let's just get right into it. Alex, you have anything else?
Well, I think we should probably get to letting each of
Yeah.
our amazing speakers introduce themselves. So without further ado, we'll go in the order here. It's really incredible group. Tanya, can I kick it to you to introduce yourself and Up Academy?
Thanks, Alex. Good morning, everyone. Here where I am, it's 9:03 a.m., so it's still morning. I'm Sheckley, founder and head of school at Up Academy. We are a project-based learning school that focuses on differentiation and student agency based in the San Francisco Bay Area.
How about you, Adele?
Hi everyone, my name's Adele, and I'm the founder and CEO of AI Learners. It's an educational platform for students with disabilities to learn early math and literacy.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Adele. Sean, tell us about Playground IEP.
Hey everybody, Sean Clam here. I am a special educator. So I was a special educator and director of special ed in Chicago. And basically every special ed tool I could ever use, it made the job harder. So I created Playground to make the job easier. So in Playground, there's tools for case management, progress monitoring, essentially all AI tools to help with IEP development, differentiation, just to make the job easier, period.
That's a very important task. Thanks, Sean. Colt, tell us about yourself and presence learning.
Thank you, Alex. My name's Colt Stander. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at Presence. At Presence, we're a leading provider of remote evaluations and special education related teletherapy services for pre-K to 12 schools. We've also built our own softwares over many years, since 2009, to really help us deliver the most efficient and best services we can across the country. And we spun that out for other folks to use in the form of a product called Kanga, which I'm sure we'll talk about later.
Exactly. Thank you. And Mara, tell us about yourself and about Journify Learning.
Hey everyone, I'm Mara. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Journify Learning. Started Journify at the Stanford Graduate School of Education. It's an AI assistant for special education. We have three main focus areas. First, helping drive student outcomes through evidence-based practices and personalization. Second, maximizing the efficiency of special education teams through paperwork automation, data integration, progress tracking across all the support providers. Our users have so far reported saving 50% of time thanks to Journify. And third, enhancing compliance at the district and the school level. Thank you.
Phenomenal. That's great. Thank you to all our panelists. And just one more call to everybody here. The panelists are incredible. The attendees are also amazing in this webinar. Everybody is people coming from all different parts of the special education world, thinking about disability, thinking about neurodiversity and neurodivergence. Please take a look at the other people in this room with you, because this is your community. There's not that many people in the world thinking about AI and special ed yet. There will be, but this is the cutting edge right here. So with that, I wanted to kick off our conversation today with just a couple of statistics just to ground us all. These maybe will be surprising to some people, may not be surprising to others. You hear some of our entrepreneurs talking about saving special educators time, reducing burnout, addressing shortages. These are major problems in the US. We see over almost more than half of special education teachers saying they are burned out. It is a very, very hard job. Education in the US is a hard job. Special education, extra hard job for a lot of different reasons, many of you know. And almost 50% have leave the profession within 5 years. So we have a real crisis in terms of the morale in terms of many special education teachers. We also see many shortages, which goes together, of course. Almost every state has reported shortages of special education teachers, and it's really the number one thing that people do have, that schools do have shortages of. It's very hard to keep and retain special education educators in various ways, and specialists. And just on the student side, we have about 15% of total public school enrollment receiving special education services in 2022, which is over 7 million students. So that is a large percentage of the student population that is being served by a educator population that is under a lot of stress and strain. And we'd all like to think about what technology may be able to do to support this entire system or even improve this system. So with that, let me kick it off. Sean, I want to start with you. You mentioned that you were a special educator and that you started your company because you wanted to make sure that something actually worked. What does it mean to work and to support people in a world where you have that high level of administrative burden?
Yeah, so first of all, I don't think I ever, as an administrator of SPED, had a full staff team. And if I have some other administrators on the call, you can probably resonate with this. I don't have a fully staffed team, or I hire somebody that I probably wouldn't have hired if I did have a fully staffed team. Like, you just need to get bodies in the building. And there are great special educators out there, but from the thousands that I've talked to, not one person has gotten into special ed because they love the paperwork. They get into it because they want to service students with disabilities. And the thing that's competing with our time as special educators is the paperwork. Now, that paperwork is not necessarily a bad thing. IEPs and progress monitoring, these are all good things. But sometimes we have lost the focus in special ed away from the students. So we have focused too much on compliance, which again, compliance is a good thing, but we need to recenter those things back on students. And AI actually gives a wonderful, the tools that AI can provide solves this problem. Not completely, right? Because there's still human problems that you need to deal with managing a caseload. But in terms of developing IEPs, progress monitoring, even just organizing a caseload, AI can do that in ways that we shouldn't be doing it because it's just too much, it's too manual.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the interesting things about AI is that it is really good at taking lots of disparate pieces of data and sort of synthesizing them and putting them together. So Mara, I want to ask you about Journify and what you're doing, how you're thinking about using AI technology to reduce teacher burnout, to reduce that paperwork burden.
Totally. So we focus on two key dimensions, which is one, efficiency. So how do we automate the most time-consuming use cases for special education teams? And this is not just the special ed teacher, it's also the paraprofessional, the therapist, the gen ed teacher working with the same special needs students, so the entire special ed team. So that's the focus of the efficiency component. And then there is another dimension of effectiveness focus around driving student outcomes through evidence-based practices. So your question was more around the efficiency topic. So when I was at the Stanford Graduate School of Education, we ran a study with over 200 special ed teachers. So we interviewed them across the entire country and asked every single one of them, what takes most of your time as a special ed teacher? And we prioritized all those answers and selected the most common pain points to tackle through Journify Learning. And they were the following three. So first, integrating and tracking data among all the support providers working with each student in real time throughout the school year. Because right now, a lot of the data is manually kept all over the place. So how do you integrate that and connect all the dots? Second, using the data to identify each student's present levels of performance in context of each IEP goal in real time. And third, also using the data to generate personalized instructional supports, whether that is formative assessments, interventions, lesson plans, because right now case managers are overwhelmed having to build all these supports for so many students on their caseload who all have different needs and different present levels. So these are the three key dimensions that we have prioritized on the maximizing efficiency dimension.
And how does AI really support them? It sort of keeps the different systems in line?
Yeah, so AI is actually really good at integrating a wide range of support providers. So the special ed teacher, the gen ed teacher, the paraprofessional therapist throughout the school year. And it keeps a historical record of all the student work they have done in context of each IEP goal. And it highlights insights in terms of each student's present levels of performance. It allows you to generate new IEP goals based on that. It makes sure that all the support providers are in sync and aligned on the students' present levels of performance. So AI is not just really good at automatically generating materials, but also at connecting a bunch of data points over historic, like long time periods across multiple support providers to highlight relevant insights in terms of student performance, any systemic risks in terms of non-compliance, falling behind on IEP goals and all that. So I would say the two key use cases for AI are data summarization and highlighting relevant patterns for compliance outcomes purposes, and generation, such that teachers save time when it comes to building instructional supports, assessments, interventions, lesson plans, and so on.
Yeah. One of the other ways in which in which technology can support the special education caregiver population is by supplementing it from outside. So, Colt, tell us a little bit about the special education shortage situation and what Presence does to support schools that can't, like Sean said, they can't get all the special educators in the building that they'd like to.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. At Presence, we bring providers from all across the country to schools all across the country, really helping distribute providers in a more efficient way. You may have too many providers in one county and not enough in another, and so we really help match those in a more efficient way. As we talk about AI, even matching providers is a really difficult problem when you're trying to match with times and locations and preferences and caseloads and certifications. That's a really difficult puzzle
Yeah.
to try to build. We deploy technology to really help with that matching. And given our scale, we've worked with over 10,000 schools over the last many years and had more than 7 million teletherapy sessions. We're really able to do that at scale, to fill in the gaps and be able to do so efficiently. Additionally, because we are the service provider as well, we wrap the provider with support to help them build that caseload. Well, rather find their school, build their caseload, deliver the therapy, and bill for that therapy. And because we've seen so many cycles of this, we've been able to build our own software that has AI enabled for automation to help with each of those pieces. And so I think our lens here is really interesting because our impact to the provider is not just on the provider themselves, but also on the school who's utilizing that provider. As Sean noted, if you're managing services within a school, even helping you be more efficient helps the providers be more efficient. And we have not only humans, but also tech and AI to be that wrapper of support for all of those providers.
Yeah. There's so many different areas of the special education ecosystem in which technology can pipe in and hopefully support. And there's a lot of different ways to support it. I think one of the things that came up as we were talking before this call was that one of the things that leads to this burnout is it's not only the administrative burden, it's also sometimes the feeling of sort of not being accepted or not being part of the traditional gen ed system, that special education educators and specialists sometimes sort of live on the margins and get sort of leftover support. They just sort of feel lesser than. They're treated as lesser than within the school system. Tanya, I want to ask you about this because I think this is something you have seen for many years and you have a lot of great thoughts about. Like, how can technology and how can we in general make the special education system feel other than a sort of separate and lesser system?
Yeah, that's a bigger question that really partially led me to founding the school. When we think back, definitely when I think back to when I was in school, special education was a place and it was a dark corner and it was in the back of the school building and nobody interacted with those kids, like they weren't a part of the daily routine. They weren't in the same lunch hour. They weren't in the same classes. And as I became a parent and had a child with special needs, my oldest daughter had cerebral palsy, and trying to find the right educational fit for her, where she was both going to get the therapies that she needed to become independent, but also the academics that she was going to need to be successful, was really a challenge. Through our early IEP meetings, we were told that she would have access to the building, and access to the classes, but would be guaranteed no specific level of education once she was inside, which as a parent made me really angry. As someone who really does believe in public school, despite starting my own school, like I do believe that every school, like every student should have access to a free and appropriate education. I think it's part of what holds this country together and helps us be strong is our public school system. But realizing that she really, while she had access, wasn't actually guaranteed an education while she was there. And thinking of like if that was our standard for all students, what that would mean and who would send their kid to that school. It just didn't make sense to me. And the more I dug into it and the more I learned, especially in the state of California, and I'm not sure if this is true across the country, but in the state of California, special education teachers don't need to have a general education teaching credential. So those students who are in a special education classroom, not just receiving services. Like I know there's many different levels and nuances within special education, but those students who are in an actual special education classroom aren't even getting the regular curriculum. It's not modified, it's not adapted, it's not the same curriculum at all. And so we're starting these students out behind when they're already overcoming challenges that set them behind and not even setting them up for the same level of education. And I found it really frustrating, to piggyback on some of what Sean said as well. Like we had an inclusion specialist in school who was supposed to help adapt materials and do homework. My daughter was fully included in classes. But he had 28 kids on his caseload that he was supposed to spend an hour a week with. Now, if you do the math, there's only 30 school hours in a week. He's supposed to spend an hour a week with each of these 28 kids, plus be spending time creating adaptive materials, meeting with teachers, meeting with specialists, understanding the IEPs, working with the parents, working with the administration, building a schedule. He was across 2 different school buildings, so there's travel time. And it's just, it's overworked. It's not possible. And so there just needed to be another way. And so I started to look at it from a really holistic, if we start from the student standpoint, not the policies and the procedures and the paperwork and the way it's been done, but if we start from the standpoint of what does the student really need and how do we create an educational experience around that, is the viewpoint from where we started and where we launched Up Academy.
Yeah. And I think some of these stories I'm sure are resonating with people in the classroom in this session about just not having enough resources and the job being basically impossible. I mean, it's a job that just is you're being asked to do more than there are hours in a week. And I think that creates the burnout. It also creates a lot of stress on the system itself. You mentioned the sort of student experience, and I want to ask a little bit about this as well. So Adele, tell us a little bit about what you're doing with AI learners and how AI might support making technology more accessible for the special education students. We've been talking a lot about the educators, but what about the student side?
Yeah, I think I want to first explain a little bit of how I started the company and relate a lot to Tanya's experiences too. So I started AI Learners during COVID. My younger sister has a disability, and she uses something called an eye gaze assistive technology device, where essentially her eyes act as a computer mouse. And during COVID, everyone was doing online school, and it was just such a challenge that she faced with trying to use online educational platforms like her peers were, or how I was using, how my brother was using. And really, that's when I was trying to dig deeper into what is that student experience that they have in school and on a digital side, and what are the challenges there, and how can we really improve that. And so a lot of what we found with existing EdTech websites for student use is they're either too simple, they're too overwhelming for students with disabilities. They don't capture their cognitive abilities, and then they are either more extreme or not supportive enough on the behavioral side. And so that was really when we were digging deeper into what is that user interface, what is that experience that students really need on that digital side. And then I started studying HCI, human computer interaction research, and really seeing, okay, this is a really complex problem. So I guess fast forward a couple of years to what we're doing now is we're really saying, okay, every student has their own unique needs and their unique needs, abilities, and interests. And so we really want to capture all three of those aspects and say, okay, how can we make sure that students are really engaged in their learning? How are we able to measure students' abilities and provide them with leveling that is actually appropriate to them? And then how do we capture all of their accessibility needs and make sure that the visuals are really adapted to them? And so that's where all of the amazing AI can really help us. But we kind of put that on after. We first identified what are those problems that we're trying to solve, how can we solve them, and then can AI help us? And I think that step also is a really important one for us, where we were seeing how AI could help us on top of it, and really where it's helping us is capturing that student information, is analyzing student data, and then really going deeper into that customization for students and making their learning even more customizable and engaging.
Yeah. The customized nature of this is really important, and I think this is something that I'm really intrigued by at this moment in AI, where suddenly, we have this system right now where there's this sort of general education system, which doesn't always work that well, but is considered, it's sort of the default for most students, and then anybody who doesn't fit into the sort of one size fits all for any number of reasons has to have this whole patchwork of supports. There aren't enough people. There's a lot of difficulty to creating a system that can work for everybody. And AI in a perfect world can actually create a system where it doesn't feel like that at all. It doesn't feel like there's a one size fits all system in the first place. It feels like the education system is different for different people based on their interests, based on their needs, based on any constraints they might have. So I want to ask the whole panel, just go around. And Sean, let me start with you here. Do you think AI is going to, and EdTech in general, may start to create a system in which everybody's education is special, where everybody's education is individualized and differentiated, and we feel a little less sort of constrained to into the system we have now?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to explain this by actually like taking a step back and like painting the landscape of what I see happening in schools. And this is really going to tie into what Tanya was saying. So if you are a principal or an administrator on this call, you're probably already keyed into special ed because you're on this call. I would say, generally speaking, most principals or superintendents really don't understand what's happening in special ed, because generally they have hired somebody that is like highly competent and just runs an awesome special ed program, right? And so what happens is you have this incredibly strong special ed program at a school or at a district that kind of takes care of everything. And while that's great for kids, the dynamic that sometimes kind of plays out, the way it plays out in a school is that there's like, sometimes there's a divide between special ed and gen ed. And you get gen ed teachers thinking, oh, that's not my responsibility. They're not on the caseload. Or like they are on the caseload. I don't know what to do to support them. A lot of times I would get teachers coming into my office saying, this kid needs an IEP. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, great. I can give them an IEP. Like we can go through that process, but then what? Because an IEP is not a magic document. Sometimes it's treated that way. And so going back to your question, I think there is such a great opportunity where AI can actually reduce that stigma of like of other. Really, when we think about it, there should either be a world where everybody has an individualized education plan or nobody has it. And what I mean by nobody has it, what I mean by that is that everybody should have a personalized plan.
Yeah.
Like that is what we do. That is what we should be doing. And when we think about like when special ed was enacted, 1974, the world of technology was much different. But when we think about the state of our schools, schools are very similar. If you were to compare a school in 1974 to right now, they're very similar, but the technology is so different. So there's like a great opportunity to lower stigma and actually increase learning, not just for students on the caseload, but all students would benefit from an individualized plan.
I agree. Mara, how about you? What are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, the way I think about it is so the IEP at the end of the day, it's focused around a bunch of IEP goals, right? Which can be any type of learning goals. You can call it an IEP goal, but if you think about it at the end of the day, that's any type of learning goal that a student who's not necessarily in tier 3, like any student across the MTSS can have their own learning goals, and they do have them. It's just not stored in like these official documents. I think what we're seeing is a lot of districts are actually asking us to use Journify across the whole MTSS spectrum, not just for special education, just because we frame the entire end-to-end compliance, instruction, integration of all support providers experience in context of around IEP goals, which can be any type of learning goal. So we tell them, sure, like go ahead and upload any of your students' learning goals and integrate all the support providers that work with them, track their progress, generate interventions. Like there's no reason why that experience cannot apply to general education. And we're now doing pilots here across MTSS. So I think thinking about it more in terms of what are the similarities, and you'll see that there are so many of them. I think that's a really key point. But I do think that once you manage to focus on the top of the like the MTSS pyramid, like a tier 3, like for the kids with most complex needs, going down the pyramid should be a bit easier than going the other way up. But yeah, that's how I think about it, and that's what we're hearing from district leaders who want to adopt the platform across all of MTSS.
Yeah, Colt, I want to bring you in on this. Just by the way, if you have particular comments, I'm seeing some great stuff in the chat. If you have some questions for our panelists, we may have a few minutes at the end, so feel free to put them in right now, and we will try to get to a few questions from the audience as soon. But Colt, when Mara and Sean mentioned what maybe everybody could have learning goals, maybe everybody could have some special adaptations. How has Presence Effect worked with this? Do you ever offer? Yeah, I'm just curious how you think about it.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex. We always start with the provider first, or rather, maybe I'll back up here a little bit. I think the conversation is really good here in that all of these tools that are enabled by tech are applicable to everyone, including probably those of us on the call who could use a little help with a thing or two. And I think that's like a really good place to start. And we really, from a tops-down perspective, we also really try to start from the provider's perspective. Our approach is always provider-led, and it's focused on how do we help that provider have the largest impact possible, right? So as we think about, yes, the tools can be applicable to everyone, we still need to ensure that the people using those tools know how to use them and are coming from a place of knowledge and impact. And so we really think about this as how do we enable that provider to meet the needs of more students, to meet the needs of more, by meeting those needs in a more efficient way. So yeah, for sure, 100%, we 100% believe that we can bring these tools to the masses. And it really starts with how do we help that provider who may be helping 40 kids today or 50 kids today? How do we help them support more kids along the way without burning them out? And as we've talked on this call, a lot of it has to do with AI and tools and automating those administrative burdens. And I want to like parlay off of Tanya's note on just how pulled thin providers are. And that not only are they pulled thin, they're also being deployed in some of the most inefficient ways, whether that be bus duty or lunch duty or any of the other duties I'm sure that they didn't sign up for special education for. And so at Presence, we find that we have a really special lens on this because not only can we enable them with tools, but we can protect them with by being virtual. And so it really ensures that schools are using their precious special education tools in the most efficient way. You're not wasting those resources even if it's accidental or, oh, it was only this one time. And so that's kind of how we think about this, is that it's a very multi-pronged approach, all enabled by technology and AI.
It's really interesting. So, Tanya, as you have made started up Academy, and as you've been thinking about this type of providing of services, do you think we're going to head towards a future where individualized education is available for more and more students?
I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, we see that in the alternative education movement. We see that in the microschool movement. We see that in things that are happening all over the country in different ways, inside and outside of special education. I did want to take a minute and go back to what Adele was talking about with the student experience.
Sure.
And share a story. Years ago, I was part of a make-a-thon, and it was when Google Glass was coming out. This might tell you how long ago this was. But we were trying to use Google Glass as more of an accessibility device to help people with disabilities who didn't have a voice be able to speak more conversationally. For those students and those people that do use an eye gaze, there's a big lag between, when a question comes up or within a conversation and them having to be able to look and type and flip through screens and then be able to say something. And so we were looking at, how can we use Google Glass and predictive technology to get to know a person's personality so that they could communicate in more real time? At the time, the technology was nowhere near what we wanted it to do. With AI, it's definitely getting way closer to being able to doing something like that. But somebody else had also, you asked about differentiation and having, all education should be special, and should everyone have their own plan? When we look at school and we look at differentiation, I honestly think that special education is leaps and bounds ahead of general education and where everybody should be. And we look at that from a differentiation, from a curriculum, but also from like an othering standpoint, and a way that every student should be able to get what they need. Because it's not the students with disabilities necessarily, but it's also, we see in our school, we work with a lot of gifted and profoundly gifted students. And so as we create differentiated groups for learning, like we'll have second, third, fourth, and fifth graders all together in a math group, because they're all learning math at that level and at that pace. And I've had questions like, well, doesn't the second grader feel really weird going into a fourth grade class? Well, no, because everybody's where they need to be for their own level of learning. And so their literacy groups look different from their math groups, look different from their project and social emotional learning groups. And it's just a matter of how we get everybody in there. And I absolutely think that AI can help us to create those groups and those pathways, and because it's really time intensive for teachers to build that and do that and know their students. But a huge part of that is also relationships. And as teachers, that's what we do, is we get to know our students and figure out what they need and help them and support them, and then use AI to help build that. So from an academic perspective, it can lower that othering when we give everybody what they need and put everybody in their right levels and groups. From a environmental standpoint, we see it as well in special education. Like there's the student who has sensory needs, so they have noise canceling headphones, and there's the student who has moving needs. There might be a bouncy chair in the room, but the noise canceling headphones and the bouncy chair are often back in the corner of the room. And so when those students need them, they can go to that space and use them. And we call that okay, and that we've checked that box and the student has what they need. But if we just put flexible seating in the classroom, so everybody can choose to sit in a bouncy seat or not, and we give a classroom set of noise canceling headphones, now these students aren't being othered for their needs, but we're creating the opportunity for all students to understand the way they learn and move better. So going back to where I think there are many places where special education is way ahead, and when we can incorporate that into all of our classrooms, nobody loses. Like everybody wins in that scenario.
Yeah, that's an incredibly exciting vision of the idea of multi-age groups that are based on their learning level, or being able to take what we know about the students to help them working together on anything they want. And of course, that I love that idea of having supports be sort of universally available, so it doesn't feel like an othering situation. It's really interesting. Adele, I want to ask you about a similar question. You know, in a world in which you think a lot about students with disabilities and making universal access. AI could potentially really allow universal access to lots of materials in lots of different ways. It could be for people using eye trackers. It could be people who don't speak the language. It could be people who can't read. They're functionally illiterate and they only use visuals for right now. I'm curious how you think about a world in which AI makes education more accessible for everyone, including special needs students and not.
Yeah, I really want to start by amplifying something that Mara said, where it's a lot when we're thinking about AI and technology supporting a group of students. It's easier to start with students that have the most challenging needs and then work backwards from there and expand to everyone. And I've really seen that in my work when talking to schools, where I'll talk to an assistive technology department, and they say, "Wow, we're so impressed that you started with special education instead of going to general ed and trying to convince us that you're accessible for special ed." And as a software developer, as an engineer, as a researcher, I think I've really seen why that's so important from like the technology building perspective as well. I've started also consulting with some other tech companies and helping them make their products more accessible. And really what we find is that from a technology, from a software perspective, it's so much harder to add accessibility on top afterwards. And it's really important to start incorporating accessibility from the start. So for really everything, EdTech, outside of EdTech, when we're building technology, accessibility should be a question at the beginning. We want to make products accessible to everyone. And talking about AI is really great at helping with that planning. It's really great at helping with incorporating accessibility and helping guide us. And I think then kind of zooming down back to ed tech, there's a lot of opportunities from that software perspective of how can we really use AI to help us create something that's accessible for special education students and for all students. And really understanding that from the beginning, from the design perspective, from the software, and from the evaluation side as well. And I guess maybe another specific example of that is AI can really help with that customization piece. And something really important for making technology accessible to a range of people is having a lot of customization and allowing for expression of your own needs, opinions, um, and really just having those choices. And that's where AI can really help shine, is then capturing people's interests and then letting that shine throughout the platform.
Mara, you know, Adele mentioned that you think about the student side as well. You mentioned as well in your intro that Journify addresses both the special educators and the special needs students. When you develop your own student-facing technology, I'm curious how you think about what Adele just mentioned. You know, how do you start with that special needs perspective in mind, and what would you recommend to other ed tech providers?
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. We don't yet have student-facing side. We only
Okay.
have educator-facing side, but one of our big focuses is helping drive student outcomes. So we build instructional support and give evidence-based practices to educators. So the way we do this is we track each student progress over time in context of each IEP goal across all of the support providers. And in context of the student's present levels of performance at any point in time, we suggest to the educator, and again, this can be the special ed teacher, paraprofessional, therapist, so on. We suggest them evidence-based strategies that they can use to help the student improve in the areas they struggle with. And those can be high leverage practices, universal design for learning, which I saw was mentioned in the chat. So we integrate a bunch of research-backed practices within the learning experience, such that as teachers implement their IEPs throughout the year, they get the training that they need to integrate these practices within instruction and help drive student outcomes. At the same time, all the generations within the platform are heavily personalized for each student, so that also helps drive the outcomes piece. So yeah, to summarize it, the way we drive outcomes is through the personalization and the evidence-based practice integration. And I think this is also connected to Cole's ideas from earlier, that special ed teachers don't get the same level of training as gen ed teachers. So it's
Right.
you, as a school district, you're constantly under pressure, under compliance pressure. So when you have a new special ed teacher, you might not have the time, the resources to train them. You have to have them in the classroom and stay in compliance and just throw them in the job and they will figure it out. So we've seen a lot of district leaders have mentioned to us, hey, as teachers save time, of course, through all the automation of the paperwork, can you also train them in the flow of the work such that we help drive student outcomes? So that's how we approach the student outcomes piece.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Sean, you mentioned earlier, I'd love to ask you a little bit more about the sort of community around any individual student in a special needs classroom, right? You have parent community, you have gen ed teacher, you have a variety of different special needs teachers or specialists or therapists, and keeping them all in line, keeping them all actually knowing what each other are doing and how to support an individual student is one of the big problems in special ed as well. And I know that's something you think about at Playground. How do you think that AI can support the ability for an entire community of special needs providers, whether they're in technically special ed or not, to support students?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is probably one part AI, one part just better design tools. You know, the supporting special ed students, obviously, like Mara was talking about, should be centered around IEP goals and that whole process. But unfortunately, you at many schools, you're still at a place where gen ed teachers are even unaware of who in their class is on the caseload. Like, that is crazy. And but when you think about it, if you like put yourself in their shoes, there's not a great way to get this information, right? So the way we think about it is, what is the easiest way to disseminate this information, right? Because most people they have no clue what the goal is for this particular student. And if you don't know what the goal is on the student is rudderless. Like, I have no idea how I'm going to point the student kind of towards their growth. If you center back on the goal, similar to what Mario was talking about, if you center on the goal, right, then you can track progress and create individualized learning, right? That AI is great at that. AI is also great at taking all of that data and summarizing and writing better IEPs. I mean, if there's any special educators on the call, you know that you just write the IEP basically when it's due. And you lose out on all this context that you've collected, not only this school year, but in years past, right? So if you had all this data in one spot, you can start to tweak it, and you can use AI to like summarize that, package it correctly, package it in a way that can be read by parents and understood by parents. When we work with schools, we get a lot of questions like, well, there's kind of two types of questions. One is like, this feels like cheating. I shouldn't be using AI to help me write my IEPs. That feels like cheating. And my response to that is, okay, well, you probably just copy and pasted another IEP goal from a different student. So using AI, you'll be all right to do that. But then I get another question of like, is this going to replace my job? And it's not going to. I mean, we learned during COVID that there needs to be teachers. Now, maybe the role of the teacher changes with AI to a more personalized approach, but you need relationships with teachers. So if anything, it actually creates more job security for you all as we go throughout. If you are dedicated and passionate about building relationships with your kids, that's going nowhere.
Yeah, of all the jobs that I think may be automated with AI, I think special needs educator is probably very near the bottom of the list. It is a job that is it's specialized. There are shortages, and it's something that is just so human. It is. I mean, it's hard to imagine. Even if AI gets better at putting together the data, I don't think that's a job at risk at all. That's my personal take. Colt, I want to ask you about how you guys think about that communications piece, because at Presence you're allowing providers to work with students in a school, whether or not the provider is in the school. How do you keep the loop of communication clean between all of the different people who need to know about that student, and how does AI support you in that?
Yeah. I'm going to take that, and I'm going to also add in a couple of the questions in the chat, because I think there's a couple of things here that are all sort of like smashing together. As we think about facilitating that conversation among the special education team, and I think it parlays really well into Nicola, your question around gaps that we see today, as well as some of this like data security sort of concerns. in that. So an important thing to note about AI is that it only works if you put the information into a computer. I know that's like a super basic thing to think about, but the reality is that the reality is that so many of us, because we are building very unique plans for very unique people, we may not have found that piece of software that works for us yet, or if we're trying to use some off-the-shelf tool, we actually default to sort of post-it notes all over our offices and things of that sort. And so the biggest gap that we see is bringing that data from paper and pen into our systems. I see a lot of heads nodding. That's great. Okay. Like that's the gap. That's the biggest gap. Now, we have a really special tool at Presence, which is teams of humans who actually help do that. And so we have special programs that even come into the school to help show best practices in terms of how to manage things and go from post-it notes on whiteboards to using our digital systems. Once the data gets into our systems, we're able to do some magical stuff with it, right? We're able to keep that data in perpetuity. We're able to protect it in a much better way than a notebook left on some desk. And we're able to start using advanced tools to provide a unique summary for a unique person, right? So whether that be a summary for a parent that's put into the terminology that they're going to understand a little bit better, or for an OT who's going to understand that perspective a little bit better, as well as be able to very rapidly give a quarter summary, a year summary, an entire lifetime summary. That is a level of effort that would take hours and hours and hours, and we're able to simplify that into a much shorter period. And so to recap here is that at Presence, because we have this service and this tech piece, we're able to build the tools and ensure that they're actually getting used by your teams internally, and that those tools are not just some off-the-shelf tool that might work or might not work, but is specifically built for what you need to run your special education departments in a best-in-class way. So.
Yeah, and that balance that you're mentioning, and then they coming up in the chat about you need the data inside the system to be able to use it, but sometimes people don't trust the systems with their data right now, and that's especially such sensitive data about individual students, and it can be medical information, right? I mean, the IEPs are legal documents. This stuff is really sensitive, and I think that tension is something that is going to continue to be present in the special education world. That said, Edtech companies know it very, very well, and compliance is absolutely at the top of the list there. Let's go do a couple more questions from the chat. Walker, can I ask you to pull? Were you going to respond to that call?
I was going to say, I'm going to respond to that too, and actually parlay it into something Adele had said earlier, in that I think I really encourage everyone who's on the panel today, or sorry, I encourage everyone who's attending today to go and check out the tools that each of the panelists have built. As Adele highlighted earlier, building from the ground up for special education is incredibly important, and it ensures that the tools are actually usable. Like to Alex, to your point, people don't use off-the-shelf tools because they don't work for them. Right. They don't work for the use case. Then one of the biggest things that we see at Presence is people hear that we make some special software to deliver especially teletherapy, but also in-person therapy. And they go, great, how is it different than Zoom? Like, can't I just use Zoom? They see what we do, and within 10 seconds, they can see the difference. And my point of telling everyone on the call here is like, go see it. Seeing is believing for all of these companies. And it's really hard to predict what those differences are and those features are that are going to change the trajectory of your SPED department without just going to see it. And it's actually a really small commitment to be able to see a 30-second video, a minute video, that sort of a thing. So just wanted to throw that in there, Alex, and that's one of our biggest insights at Presence is people just don't, it's really hard to visualize it without seeing it.
Yeah. And starting with the use cases in mind gives you specialized, it is means something very different than the off-the-shelf tools, especially with AI, right? You don't want to put an IEP into Claude, right? That doesn't make any sense. But with some of these platforms, they handle this stuff really, really carefully and thoughtfully. Walker, are there questions from the chat that we can call out?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we've covered a lot of them in the past few minutes. There was one question about where the panelists are getting their information. Like, are you testing your products and tools in schools particularly designed for students with learning disabilities? Are you testing them in just general public schools? Things like that.
Interesting. Does anybody want to tackle that about sort of when you maybe Mara, I could kick off for you because you're a relatively new company. When you're starting and you're growing quickly, where does your first test bed population test bed when you're starting your tool?
Yeah, we've been really lucky. We co-built the product from the beginning with two large districts, one from California, one from Washington, that really trusted us from the beginning. So we co-built all the features driven by teacher input, which was huge. At this point in time, we work with large districts, small districts, non-public schools and private schools as well, charter schools. So it's a really, really big mix of schools. But I think having this co-building approach and having an advisory board of teachers who drive all the changes that happen in the platform and constantly give feedback, it's huge. And we have an advisory board of teachers that we work with on a weekly basis, and they review everything we do. So that's been our approach so far to testing and building and being very close to the user and really obsessed with their feedback.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Tanya, I wanted to ask you a little bit about something similar. If we don't, and please put more questions in the chat. And Walker, if you see one else, just raise your hand and say it. But one of the things that I think is really interesting about Up Academy is that you have very different students, and you take this project-based learning approach, which changes the entire. So you're doing a sort of alternative version of education, both in terms of the educational side and in terms of the population. How did you come up with that idea, and what do you think the EdTech community might learn from that kind of approach?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so my kids went to a project-based learning public school in Mountain View, and was fortunate as a kindergarten teacher to have one of the founders of the school, and got a chance to really see. It was also a parent participation school, so I don't have a background in education. My background was in business. But spending time in the classroom and seeing how she really built projects out of student interest, as well as what she needed to cover in the curriculum, but the really creative and unique ways that she found to do that was really gave me a different perspective on the way education could be. And as I dug more into it, and as I grew in Up Academy, I come to learn that project-based learning is often seen as something more for the gifted students, or the students that are doing well in school. Then they get this bonus of this extra project class, or like what I'm seeing now in my daughter's high school is the regular classes are going through the curriculum, but the honors classes have additional projects and applied ways of utilizing the knowledge. And looking at it, like, we all learn best when we get to actually apply the things that we're learning. And then when we can share that with other people and tell them what we've learned and how we did it, that even deepens our learning and understanding more, while also developing confidence and self-esteem and public speaking. So when we can incorporate all of that into the learning style and learning system, it creates deeper learning, it creates more understanding. It also naturally differentiates and scaffolds. So you can have one project for multi-levels of students, and like, one student might be expected to write a 2-page research essay on what you're doing, where your younger student or student who isn't as advanced in that way might be writing a paragraph about what they've done. They can do the same project, they can learn the same things. They're sharing their learning at their level of output, at their level of understanding, at their capacity for where they are in their learning journey. And so from a mixed stage class and mixed stage perspective and mixed ability perspective, the project-based learning really makes learning accessible and exciting and interesting for everyone. Whereas, sitting and listening to a teacher talk and regurgitating on a test isn't necessarily accessible for everyone. I but physically can't write that answer out to I don't understand knowledge that way as easily. I need to do it. I need to touch it. I need to see it. I need to go on the field trip and understand it. Right.
Yep.
And so when you incorporate all of these things in project learning, you bring along all of the learners with you. It's the same way we looked at building in our regular curriculum, right? So we use an English language arts curriculum that is designed for dyslexia and to support students with dyslexia and learning to read. Well, when you do that, you bring along almost all of your students with you. So the students, the 10 to 15% that would be left behind in a traditional curriculum aren't left behind anymore because you're using a curriculum that works for them. This doesn't mean that all the rest of the students don't learn to read. Oh, I'm not dyslexic. I'm not going to learn to read using a dyslexia-friendly learn to read system. Like, it doesn't work that way. Similar to the same thing I said earlier about creating spaces and not othering and universal design, in the environment, the same thing works in curriculum. When we use a curriculum that supports everyone, everybody learns. It's the same thing Adele said about designing software. When we design software for the people that it's most difficult for them to use, everybody can use it, right? When we design for accessibility, it's not like the people who don't need that can't use it. It just means that everybody who does need that also can use that. And it's the same thing from curriculum. It's the same thing from project-based learning.
Yeah, it's a great multiple means of expression, right? You have different ways to express your learning. Yeah, I think that's really powerful. I think we're getting towards the top of the hour, but there's a question in the chat, and it sounds like Sean, you wanted to take it. Do you mind reading the question and then answering it about FERPA?
Yeah, so the question is, are there any FERPA concerns with putting student information into an LLM to generate an IEP? Okay, so we give a whole 1-hour workshop on this. If you're curious, you can create a free account and then you get on our mailing list. And I think in 2 weeks, we'll have another session on this. In 60 seconds, it is not FERPA compliant, period.
Right.
You cannot do that. So if you want to generate goals, sure, you can do that without putting in student personal information. FERPA is very specific about how a school can share information with you. Basically, they say to a school, you can't share data. There's only 8 exceptions. One of them is a school official exception. So when you're working with technology, that vendor falls up under a school official. And so that agreement needs to take place with the data privacy agreement. And I'm going to drop one in the chat so that you can look at what a data privacy agreement looks like just in general, just a standard one. But yes, do not put student information into an LLM. Don't do that. Yeah, don't do that.
And I think that speaks to Cult's point as well, right? You can't do that because these general purpose tools do not protect data the right way, and it is not compliant at all. But the tools that all of these panelists make are compliant in exactly that way, and they think very deeply about how to handle student information. So it's a fantastic example of when to go specialized.
And Sean, that's a really, really great start. Or sorry, that's a really great lens on sort of compliance-driven pieces of this. And let's not forget that tool's not made for creating IEP plans.
Right, that too.
Right. And so like every time you start, it's going to be, imagine like you're teaching someone how to create an IEP plan the first time, every time. There are tools out there to help you that are built specifically for IEP, to write IEP plans, and they like have prompt support built in to do that along the way. So not only you shouldn't, and you shouldn't for compliance reasons, and you shouldn't for like usability reasons.
For expertise reasons, yeah, for knowledge reasons. Thank you all for being here. This has been a great panel. We will be sharing the recording and the transcript and a resources for people to follow up on. Yeah, if you don't already follow Edtech Insiders, please do. We have more webinars coming up soon. This has been an amazing panel. Thank you so much to all our panelists. They're doing incredible work. I feel like the dumbest person in the room, not for the first time, but especially today, in terms of, or just the person with the least knowledge in the room, because this is such a group of incredible experts. Thank you so much to all of you, and please pay attention to the other attendees and panelists here, because this is an incredible group and really thinking about amazingly important issues. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate the feedback as well. Thank you. Keep an eye out for emails with future resources and links to the recording and transcript as well. Thank you so much. And thanks to all our panelists again.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Great. All the love is really appreciated. We really do appreciate all the emojis and comments as well. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.